That night still lingers in my mind, not because of what was said, but because of how it was said. My grandson waited until the lights were out, the house quiet, and then he whispered. And in that moment, everything felt different. Before I tell you what happened, I want to know, where are you watching from tonight? Are you curled up on your couch in a quiet town, or maybe listening while the city hums outside your window? Tell me in the comments. My name is Patricia. I'm 75 years old, and I've lived in this little 2-story house for over 4 decades. The creak of the wooden floors, the soft hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen, they're the kind of sounds that become part of you after a while. My days are predictable. Morning tea, tending to the garden, reading on the porch, and sometimes baking a pie when the mood strikes. I've always found comfort in the ordinary. But that evening, well, it was anything but ordinary. Michael, my grandson, had been staying with me for a few weeks. He's 30 now, tall with a gentle way about him. And he's always been the kind of man who notices the small things, like the way I take my tea with just 1 sugar cube, or how I hum without realizing it when I'm cooking. We'd spent the earlier part of the day working in the yard together. He trimmed the hedges while I pulled weeds from the flower beds. I remember the smell of fresh grass clinging to the warm summer air, and the way the fading sunlight cast a golden glow over the garden. After dinner, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, we washed the dishes together. I stood at the sink, hands in the warm, soapy water, while Michael dried each plate and stacked it neatly. We talked about little things, the weather, an old neighbor who had recently moved away, a memory from his childhood when he used to race his bike down my driveway. It was easy, comfortable. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the soft light of evening settled over the house. I felt tired, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones. After a warm shower, I changed into my nightgown and padded to my bedroom, the carpet cool under my feet. Michael said he'd stay up for a bit, reading in the living room, so I wished him good night and closed my door. Lying there in the dark, I listened to the familiar nighttime sounds, the slow tick of the clock on my nightstand, the distant hum of traffic beyond the quiet neighborhood. My mind began to drift, halfway between waking and sleep. That's when I heard it, the softest knock at my door. 3 gentle taps. Before I could even respond, the door opened just a crack, letting in a faint sliver of light from the hallway. I saw the outline of Michael standing there. He didn't come in right away, just lingered for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. "Grandma?" he said softly, his voice carrying a weight I couldn't quite place. I propped myself up on my elbow. "Yes, Michael?" He stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him. The light from the hallway vanished, leaving only the dim shape of him against the darker room. He didn't turn on the lamp. Instead, he walked slowly toward the side of my bed and sat down on the edge, the mattress tipping slightly under his weight. For a moment, he didn't speak. I could hear his breathing, steady but deeper than usual. Then, in that quiet, he leaned just a little closer. When he finally whispered, the sound was so soft, I almost thought I imagined it. His words were deliberate, his tone low but warm. And though I won't tell you exactly what he said just yet, I will tell you this. In that moment, my heart tightened, and the air in the room felt different. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but I could feel something unspoken between us. Not in a way that frightened me, but in a way that made me curious. Whatever he had come to share that night, I knew it wasn't something casual. I reached for his hand, my fingers brushing against his in the dark. His skin was warm, his grip gentle. "Michael," I said quietly, "you can tell me anything." And that's when I realized whatever happened next would change how I looked at him forever. I reached for the lamp and turned the knob until the room glowed a warm amber. Michael's face came into view. Not the easy smile I knew from afternoons in the garden, but a tight, uncertain line. His eyes looked like he hadn't slept in days. He kept my hand in his, not gripping, just holding as if he were measuring whether a bridge would bear his weight before stepping onto it. "Say it again," I whispered back. "I want to hear it with the light on." He swallowed, glanced at the window where the curtain billowed slightly with the night breeze, and leaned closer. "I'm not okay, Grandma," he said. "I haven't been for a while." The words were simple, but they landed with such gravity that I felt the mattress dip again under their weight. I shifted upright against the pillows and patted the quilt beside my knee. He moved a little closer, not crowding, just near enough that we could speak softly and still hear each other over the ticking clock. His shoulders rose and fell as if each breath took concentration. "You don't have to be brave for me," I said. "Not tonight." He nodded, eyes glistening. "It started with the layoffs," he said. "They called it restructuring. I told everyone it was fine, that I'd wanted to leave anyway. Then the rent went up. I dipped into savings, then into the card, then into another card. I kept thinking I would fix it before anyone noticed. I kept thinking I was still the guy who could fix things." As he spoke, the room took on the hush of a chapel. The lamp cast a circle of light over the quilt, making every thread stand out like tiny roads mapping the years this old bed had seen. I could almost hear the echoes in those threads, nights I'd soothed his fever with cool cloths, nights his grandfather, and I whispered our own fears in the very same dim glow. Michael was still the boy who used to race his bike down my driveway, only now the bike had turned into a burden he couldn't set down. "I'm sorry you carried it alone," I said. "That's a heavy thing to haul in the dark." He gave a soft laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "I came in here because I knew you'd wake up if I knocked any louder. And because when the lights are out, it's easier to say the things that feel too big for daylight." I waited. There is a kind of listening that doesn't interrupt, a listening that trusts the pause. He rubbed his palms together as if warming them at a fire. "There's more," he said. "I ended things with Natalie. I told everyone it was mutual. It wasn't. She wanted more from me than I could be. I don't know how to be all that to someone. Dad always made leaving look easy, you know." His mouth tightened. "I'm afraid there's a stubbornness in me I can't unlearn." Outside, a car passed and its headlights slid across the ceiling in a brief ribbon of silver. It reminded me of summers when we'd count lightning bugs on the porch, him small and serious, palms cupped like he was holding the moon. I felt that same ache now, the tenderness you feel looking at someone who still believes in you even when they've stopped believing in themselves. "You are not your father," I said. "And even he was not only the worst day you remember. People are long books, Michael. You met him on the chapter where the rain wouldn't stop." He looked at me, the corners of his eyes softening. "You always make it sound like there's more pages left." "There are," I said. "For both of us." He exhaled, a slow surrender. "I came here to ask for help, and I hate that. I hate that I'm 30 and asking my 75-year-old grandmother how to stand up. What I am asking, will you help me figure things out without making me feel like a broken thing?" I reached out, and this time when I took his hand, he turned it over and let me read the lines on his palm like an old map. "It's not broken," I said, pressing my thumb into the center. "It's just used. Used means you've been living. We can work with used." He nodded again, and then, so quietly I almost missed it, asked, "Can I stay a little longer? Not forever. Just until I can breathe without counting what it costs." "You don't have to pay for breathing in this house," I said. "You can stay. We'll make a plan, one step at a time." And tomorrow morning, we'll do it with coffee and toast, because that's how proper plans begin." He smiled for the first time that night, small and grateful, the way a window smiles when you open it after a long winter. The knot in his shoulders loosened, and with it something in me loosened too. A quiet joy that came from being useful again in a world that often walks past older hands without seeing the work they still know how to do. He glanced toward the dresser. "Is that the box with Grandpa's papers?" he asked. "The cedar one." I followed his gaze. The little cedar box sat where it always had, its lid etched with a pattern of vines my husband had carved when he was young and too poor to buy me anything but time and patience. "It is?" I said. "Why?" "I found a letter," Michael said. "I didn't mean to snoop. The lid wasn't closed all the way and the corner was sticking out. I think it's addressed to you. From the year Dad left." His voice thinned. "I think Grandpa meant me to see it someday." Something flickered in my chest. Not fear, something adjacent to it. A tremor from a bell struck long ago. I had forgotten about that letter, or maybe I had wanted to. I remembered the day it arrived, the mailbox hot from the sun, my hands shaking as I broke the seal, my husband's handwriting a familiar river I could step into and be carried. He'd written about forgiveness like it was a garden you watered whether you felt like it or not. "Would you like to read it together?" I asked. Michael hesitated, then nodded. "If you're ready." "I'm ready to try," I said. "But not tonight. Tonight we did something braver than reading a letter. We told the truth out loud." His throat worked. "Thank you," he said, words simple and clean as an empty sink. We sat there in the lamplight, not in a rush to fill the air. He looked lighter, as if someone had lifted a backpack he'd forgotten he was wearing. I thought about the small economies of love, how a whisper in the dark can be worth more than a speech in daylight, how a steady hand can make a bridge where there wasn't one. I drew the quilt up around my legs, and he, noticing, stood and quietly adjusted the corner so it tucked neatly. That tiny act, the care of it, brought a tightness to my throat. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll start with the budget, look at the cards, call the landlord. And maybe I can fix the porch step for you. It wobbles." "Tomorrow," I agreed. "And when the step holds, you'll remember your hands can make things steady." He moved toward the door and paused with his hand on the knob. The hallway beyond was dark as a pond. He turned back, not quite a silhouette now, but a man I loved, framed in a doorway he could walk through as many times as he needed. "I came in here because the lights were out," he said. "But I'm leaving with the light on." I nodded. "Leave it. Just for tonight." He slipped into the hallway and pulled the door almost closed, leaving a finger's width of light as a promise. I lay back against the pillow and listened to his footsteps fade to the living room, the creak of the couch as he settled, the sigh of a house that had absorbed more than one hard confession and found room for it. The ceiling was a soft field of amber. I stared up at it and thought about the work of the morning, not just phone calls and numbers, but the slower, older work of teaching someone how to be gentle with himself in a world that rewards noise. My eyes drifted to the cedar box. It seemed to breathe with the room. In the quiet, I felt the steady hum of something mending. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like a small tear under a patient needle. And beneath that, a steadier bass note. I was not done being useful. He was not done learning how to trust his own hands. The letter could wait. The garden could wait. We had decided to try. I turned the lamp off and let the dark return, this time carrying no fear. Somewhere down the hall, Michael whispered good night, a soft sound that reached me like a warm draft. The house held us both, and in that small mercy I found the kind of rest that comes when a door and a heart are left just slightly open. Morning sunlight has a way of finding the smallest cracks in my curtains, no matter how carefully I draw them closed. That day it came in thin gold ribbons across my quilt, warming the space where Michael had sat the night before. I lay there a moment, remembering the tone of his whisper, the way it carried both weight and hope. The house was quiet except for the faint clink of dishes from the kitchen. I could smell coffee, strong, the way he makes it, and the faint sweetness of toast. Pulling on my robe, I made my way down the hallway, each step creaking in the familiar rhythm that had scored my mornings for decades. Michael stood at the counter, sleeves pushed up, hair still mussed from sleep. He looked better, not fixed, but steadier. When he saw me, he smiled, and it was a fuller smile than the one I'd seen in weeks. "I made you the first cup," he said, sliding the mug toward me. I took it in both hands, feeling the warmth seep into my fingers. "Thank you," I said. "I was just thinking we should start with coffee before the day decides to be complicated." We sat at the table, a stack of papers between us, bills, statements, envelopes he'd been avoiding. The cedar box was there too, smaller than I remembered, but heavy in presence. Michael glanced at it more than once while we worked through the numbers. We talked about the cards, the overdue rent, where the money was going. For every problem he named, we looked for one small solution. Call the landlord and explain, cancel the subscriptions he barely used, set up a new budget that didn't feel like punishment. It was slow work, but with each item crossed off, I could see him breathing a little easier. When we reached the bottom of the pile, he rested his hands on the cedar box. "Do you think now's a good time?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, I think we're both ready." The hinges groaned softly when he lifted the lid. Inside, between old photographs and faded receipts, lay the envelope. My name was written in my husband's careful hand, the ink slightly smudged in places, as if he paused often while writing. Michael handed it to me, and I turned it over before sliding a finger under the seal. The paper inside was brittle with age. His words began simply, "Patricia, if you're reading this, I need you to know." He spoke of regret, of choices made too quickly, of the way he'd watched Michael as a little boy, and wished he'd been a man who stayed. He asked me to tell our grandson that love was more than just promises. It was the keeping of them, even on quiet, ordinary days. He wrote about building things back, piece by piece, and how sometimes the first step was admitting you'd broken them. By the time I reached the end, my eyes blurred. Michael had been reading over my shoulder. I felt his breath catch at certain lines. When I set the letter down, the silence between us wasn't empty. It was thick with everything we both understood, but didn't need to say. "That's the kind of man I want to be," Michael said finally. "The one who keeps the promises in the quiet days." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You already started last night." He squeezed back, his grip firm but gentle. "I don't think I could have if you hadn't left the light on." We spent the rest of the morning fixing the porch step. The wood was warped, the nails rusted, but side by side we pried, sanded, and set it straight again. The work left us dusty and tired, but every time we tested the step, it held. Later, as the sun began to set, Michael sat on the porch rail, sipping iced tea. "You know," he said, "I think I'm going to be okay. Not overnight, but I will be." I smiled, watching the light fade across his face. That's all I ever wanted to hear. When night came again, we moved through the house, turning off lamps one by one. Just before he headed to bed, Michael paused at my door. He didn't knock this time, just leaned in and said softly, "Good night, Grandma." "Lights on or off?" "Leave them on," I said. "At least for a little while." He nodded and walked away, and I knew this was the beginning of something new. Not perfect, but real. And in a world where so much can change overnight, that kind of truth felt like the most precious thing we could keep.